Hello and welcome to the Stop Devaluation Podcast. I'm your host and founder of the Stop Devaluation movement, Melodye Hilton. The heart of this movement is to see the value in all of humanity and live courageous lifestyles of using our power for good instead of harm. We can affect change by choosing validation over judgment, and I hope you'll take your place and make a positive impact in this world.
Political pride and prejudice. When political agendas become seedbeds for abuses of power, it is destructive to a nation and the people it is commissioned to serve. When a nation's citizenry is manipulated to obtain a political platform rather than using these platforms of power for the good of the people, we see the devastation. A contemporary example is evidenced in Venezuela. Former President Hugo Chavez came into power proclaiming to fight against corruption, only to unleash greater widespread exploitation of the people. After Hugo's death, President Nicolas Maduro was elected from the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. The Venezuelan people have rapidly lost their rights through intimidation, censorship, and prosecution. The nation is in chaos. I have given much thought to political pride and prejudice. Wrestling over power and agendas rather than focusing on healing can position a nation to implode under the weight of bigotry. This is a volcano that we do not want to erupt. Ethnic pride and prejudice. On one of my visits to Kenya, East Africa, I met the most beautiful young woman living in Nairobi. Her name is Frida. She was young, tall, elegant, and astonishingly gorgeous. Her demeanor was confidently gentle as she carried herself with the refinement of a wealthy diplomat's daughter. Our conversation rapidly moved from a casual inquiry of her greatest passion to the heart-wrenching story of her life. It was a story of politically generated tribal hatred and prejudice with those of the same race. As she shared, I learned that she was a victim of the Rwandan genocide that began in 1994. During that time, over 800,000 people of the minority Tutsi tribe were killed by the rival majority Hutu tribe. At a mere 14 years old, Frida found herself crouched in horror next to her family members inside the only home she ever knew. They heard the screams of their neighbors as the Hutu tribe systematically moved from house to house, slaughtering her family's Tutsi friends and neighbors. Somehow, making matters even worse was the surreal awareness that those killing their loved ones were also their fellow villagers. They didn't come from a distant land to carelessly slaughter strangers. Rather, these were the same people they had played with and gone to school with as children. They ate at each other's homes. Before this genocide began, they were friends. Now there was nowhere to run, nowhere to escape, so they held each other for the last time, helplessly waiting for their executioners to come. When their Hutu neighbors arrived, they brutally raped and violently beat Frida, her sisters, and mother. Frida watched as they decapitated her mother next to her. With violent ferocity, a bloodbath ensued. Frida, along with 15 of her family members, were buried in a single large mass grave piled on top of each other. They covered the grave with stones, branches, and leaves. Their Hutu killers thought that all were dead. Unbeknownst to them, beneath the ground, the unconscious Frida's heart was still beating. Frida came to consciousness in the middle of the night. She was paralyzed from the waist down, but she somehow managed to pull herself out of the grave inch by inch. She dragged herself into the woods, using only her arms, searching for a place to hide. There are many more details to Frida's story, but alas, she made her way to a refugee camp and was sent to Kenya for safety and recovery. Recalling our conversation from many years ago, I continue to experience a dichotomy of emotions as I did that day. My heart was broken. I was furious as a whirlwind of thoughts raged inside of me, but at the same time, I was overwhelmed with the grace that Frida still managed to carry. Not many years after these events took place, she shared how she willingly returned to the same Hutu tribe members who viciously murdered her family and left her for dead. She forgave them. Her incredible story of forgiveness for those who slaughtered those she loved was and is truly remarkable. Her extraordinary journey from brokenness to wholeness affected my heart deeply all those years ago, and still does today. The beautiful young woman I met that day in Kenya refused pride, prejudice, and all the ugly things that accompany it. No one could ever blame her if she were angry, bitter, wanted revenge, but instead she chose a road less traveled. Her brave choices positioned her for a life to love and the ability to influence countless others. I will never forget Frida, her story, or the personal power she possessed to rise above the horror she experienced. Frida's story brings to light the powerful influence of politics and ethnicity to devastate lives, communities, and even nations. Friends had become enemies as they were incited by a government ruled by Hutu power. Could it even be possible that a political agenda could drive a mass genocide? It did. Could a political divide separate lifelong trusted relationships? It did. Is it plausible that people could demonstrate more loyalty to a political ideology than to valuable human beings? It happened not so long ago. It is a frightening thought to see the pervasive ability that pride and prejudice has upon the passive mind that believes the loudest and most prevalent voice. Without clearly knowing our identity and purpose, we will find ourselves echoing the loudest voice we hear. Gender pride and prejudice. Whether male chauvinists or man-hating women, both are destructive to emotional health, mature relationships, a safe home environment, and the widespread impact on society. On a trip to Portugal, my husband and I stumbled upon male-dominated pride and prejudice concerning women. It was not blatant abuse, however. There was a definite air of superiority in the men's interaction with women. My husband Stephen's shrewd response to this sexist culture touched my heart, not only as his wife, but also as a representative of womankind. He had an opportunity to speak to this particular group and ask them a question. How many of you would like half of your body paralyzed? All responded with a resounding no. They didn't grasp why he was asking this. Stephen began to convey that when women are confined within a prejudicial box, half of the population is metaphorically paralyzed. This hinders our ability to make progress and advance as a whole. These men soon discovered their internal voice of bigotry. When we limit others, it sabotages our unified potential. I have traveled to a nation where patriarchal authority gave the man the right to have sexual relationships with any female who lived under his roof. This was culturally acceptable. When girls entered puberty, they underwent the horrific practice of female genital mutilation. The effects of these accepted practices resulted in these precious young girls living in the wake of emotional and physical shame. They could not see their beauty, value, or worth. My heart was breaking. After a few years of building trusted relationships with the people of this nation, the leadership provided me with the honor of speaking into their lives. With great sensitivity, I addressed these culturally destructive traditions. The men were incredibly humble as the internal voice of bigotry was confronted with medical facts and a message of value on behalf of the women. Their eyes filled with tears, but more importantly, their hearts were softened at the stark realization of what they previously had not considered. That day, at least for those present, the culture began to change in their homes. It is impossible to control someone's heart or legislate their convictions, but we can be a voice of truth, justice, and reconciliation. In different places all over our world, it is culturally acceptable to devalue women and to treat them as property. In some nations, honor killings are practiced when a woman has brought dishonor to the family, even for the smallest infraction. She is blamed when victimized through rape. She puts her life in danger for desiring a divorce from an abusive husband. Young girls are sold or forced into marriage propagated from poverty, tradition, or simply gender prejudice. Looking in our own backyard, I've witnessed forward movement from my women's liberation days. However, the fact remains that women are still the dominant target for sex crimes, continue to fight for equal pay for equivalent positions, and are often relegated to stereotypical family roles. Every woman deserves to be free from violence and male domination. Her marriage should be a place of safety, never something to cause her to live as a slave in her own home. Many girls are disallowed education, and many women are denied the right to vote or the ability to earn a fair wage and are demoralized sexually. When cultural events are propagated generationally and become socially expedient, the conscious mind adapts. The man shields himself from any sense of guilt from his violent and cruel attitudes and actions towards women. The man's cultural reality accepts that it is morally right and true that his responsibility is to control the lesser sex. The woman's ability to discover her humanity and a sense of value ceases to exist. Her response often becomes fear-driven compliancy. Gender prejudice is also subtly woven into culture, and often ambiguous in both personal and professional interaction. When we must justify our degrading comments with a defensive response, covering it up as a joke or brushing it under the rug as if it had no effect, our biased point of view will become known. Whenever gender is viewed through a filter of pride, seeing one as greater than another, it will always divide rather than unite. This pride will justify our right to overvalue our worth and undervalue another's, which perpetuates competition rather than collaboration. However, when we can see each other as equals in value, each with something to contribute that the other needs, we can finally embrace our full collective potential.
I want to thank you for listening and encourage you to become a part of the Stop Devaluation movement. Be sure to like and follow #StopDevaluation on social media, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and visit StopDevaluation.com for more information and free resources. You can help spread the movement by sharing with others, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, and most of all, by living a courageous lifestyle of using your power for good. Go out and value someone today. Your life matters, and you can make the world a better place. One word, one choice, one action of validation at a time.